Now, as we said in the intro, welcome to Nuclear Illinois.
Yes, thank you.
We may not have good baseball teams, but we're #1 on nukes at least. What would you say to let's say John Rowe, the chairman of Exelon, who has 14 reactors here, a bunch in Pennsylvania, now they're talking about building one in Texas. Not just what would you say to John Rowe, but what would you say to his shareholders about this so-called nuclear renaissance, this idea that in spite of those 4 big problems you identified, it's time to build new reactors and get things moving again?
I would say read the lips of Wall Street. So just purely from a financial point of view, nuclear power plants have been shown to be risky investments. They take a long time to build. Their financing is somewhat more expensive because they are risky than conventional power plants. For the first few power plants in the supposed nuclear renaissance, the federal government has said we'll give you subsidies. But really, there can't be a nuclear renaissance on 6 reactors. It's got to be dozens of reactors. We've got 103 operating today. Without that, the system cannot sustain enough engineers, enough safety systems, good regulation to make the industry viable. Simply ordering a reactor is losing sight of the main business that Exelon is in.
Which is?
Exelon is not in the business of nuclear electricity. I think Exelon is in the business of supplying electricity to the public, and electricity can come from a lot of different sources. And
For
we
example?
have to make, well, we have natural gas. Natural gas, even today at today's prices, is competitive with nuclear, if you can build a nuclear power plants with contained costs. We have wind power. Wind power today is more economical than nuclear. In the high wind areas, such as in the Midwest, it costs about 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour to generate electricity from a wind power plant.
Now, some of the nuclear advocates might have some problems with that number because wind has enjoyed a lot of federal subsidies. And then the other thing is that they would say is that sometimes the wind doesn't blow, so it's an intermittent resource. How would you respond to that?
Well, 4 or 5 cents cost is without subsidies.
Oh, okay.
So when you, and the costs of the nuclear electricity as estimated by the University of Chicago in a recent study or by Massachusetts Institute of Technology in a recent study, and they advocate nuclear power also without subsidies, are 6 to 7 cents. Mm-hmm. So we're comparing costs on a completely level playing field. It's true that nuclear can provide baseload generation, so whenever you flip the switch, the electricity will be there, and wind power cannot do that without some kind of energy storage. However,
energy storage meaning?
Energy storage means you use some of the wind power to pump water back into a hydroelectric reservoir, and then you run that water through turbines and generate electricity when you need it, when the wind is not blowing.
So you're not necessarily talking batteries or that sort of thing?
No, you're not talking batteries. Batteries would be far too expensive to use for large-scale energy storage. We're talking something more like pump storage in existing dams. You don't have to build new dams for that. You can use existing reservoirs and manage them. But we don't need storage right now for wind energy. Our wind energy supply in the grid nationally is only 1 or 1.5%. You can go up to 10 or 15% electricity supply from wind without worrying about reliability problems. Will it be there when you flip the switch? Because the other 85% takes care of that. You have natural gas turbines in the system that are idling, that come on instantly whenever you flip the switch, and the rest of the system is maxed out. I've advocated that actually part of our natural gas power system can be idled deliberately, because gas is kind of expensive, and wind is actually cheaper than natural gas generation. Gas is more comparable to nuclear. So you can actually idle your natural gas power plants partly, run them at 50% instead of 80%, and when the wind is not blowing, you ramp up that other 30%. So you can combine wind energy with pump storage and natural gas to take care of the reliability question and the availability question, and actually have wind go up to 20–30% of the power supply. And today, nuclear supplies 20% of the electricity.
So what you've described is a system that it's a little bit more complex than what the utilities tell people. It's either coal or nuclear. And
Right.
what you're indicating that if you have a proper mix of things, the reliability is enhanced because there's redundancy and different availabilities at different times.
That's right. Also, you don't need to build all your windmills in the same place. So when you have diversity, geographical diversity, if you have some windmills in North Dakota, if you have some windmills in New Mexico, Wyoming, Illinois, and so on, the wind doesn't blow in the same intensity in different places,
Right.
so you get, it's just like on the demand side, the capacity of electricity utilities, electric utilities, to supply electricity is much smaller than the capacity of the devices we all have hooked up. We all have lots of refrigerators hooked up and stoves hooked up and lights hooked up. If we turn them all on at the same time, the system would crash. But refrigerators only come on some of the time, and so there's a diversity in the demand side. So the installed capacity is supplying some refrigerators some of the time, and then when those are down, supplying. So you can create a diversity on the supply side in the same way. But for the next many years, what happened last year? Let's be specific. Let's not look to the future, which is necessarily speculative. Last year, about 4,000 megawatts, more or less, were added in wind energy to the U.S. electricity supply.
Which is
and
roughly,
0 was added by nuclear.
Which is roughly the equivalent of 4 Braidwood-sized nuclear reactors.
Well, I don't think it would be fair to compare it to 4 Braidwood-sized reactors because wind is intermittent. In terms of total electricity generation, it's equivalent to about 1.5.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to build about 3 megawatts of wind or 3.5 megawatts of wind, depending, maybe 3 to 4 megawatts of wind to be comparable to 1 megawatt of nuclear or coal.
Okay.